Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And what I want to do, starting with this video, is take an honest look at Disney Star Wars' The Acolyte. Let's just be honest with ourselves here at this moment. Disney Star Wars is in an absolutely awful place. Disney has not made any money whatsoever on the Star Wars franchise, and a lot of people are in agreement that the writing, the production, the messaging, everything has just been really bad. Yes, there have been some good moments, and for some people they would say, no, it's all been bad, but speaking generally and being honest with ourselves, there have been good moments from Disney Star Wars. There have been projects and characters and moments that we've really enjoyed. But we've gotten to a point now where Kathleen Kennedy and crew are actively trying to separate themselves away from what George Lucas created. Now, I'm going to say something that I know is immediately going to have people raising up their flags, but hold on for just a second. It's not necessarily a bad thing that Kathleen Kennedy and Disney Star Wars want to move in a different direction than what George Lucas began, what he created. And the reason why I'm going to say that is this. We can all agree that Star Wars is a modern myth. It is. It is a story that has resonated with generations. It is a story that has made characters and ideas and places and moments and quotes immortal. Even though people are saying, the younger generation really doesn't care about Star Wars, that's not true. There's so many kids, young boys and girls out there who have been raised on Star Wars, who love Star Wars, who are going to continue to pass it on from generation to generation. This is myth. When stories that resonate with people, that teach them things, that communicate amazing ideas and characters and adventures to them, that capture people's imagination and make them want to go to other places and to build on it and to come up with their own stories and just imagine what it would be like to be on those adventures with these characters that they love so much, to go to these worlds and these places and these events that have captured their imagination. That is myth. Star Wars is a modern myth, but myths do change. Anyone who says otherwise needs to go and have a look at the history of any good notable myth. And what you will see is that myths change over time. The character Hercules, who we've come to know and love, and Hades and Persephone, who are now just everywhere in the in the YA romance limelight. Well, Hades and Persephone originally had a very different beginning in myth. Hercules, once upon a time, was just a cool dude who happened to be one of the many sons of Zeus. But yet, over time, as people worked with these myths, as they were passed from generation to generation and new ideas and whatnot were added to them, these characters and events changed and became something else. And that's okay, because you want to know what was passed down to us, what we know about Hercules, Hades, Persephone, and really think about any other mythical character or event. Those were determined by past generations to be the absolute best stories, the ones that people loved, the ones that they wanted to continue passing down. Now, when we look at Disney Star Wars, it's very clear that most of the stories that they've made will not be passed down from generation to generation. I mean, sure, yeah, we'll see. I can come back here on this channel 40, 50 years from now and then evaluate where we are at. But I'm pretty confident in saying that no one is going to pass along Book of Boba Fett to the next generation. And even though a lot of people love the Andor series, I also don't think that that's going to get passed down. And just how much backlash the Disney sequel trilogy has gotten, I really don't think that that's going to get passed down either. So when we look at Disney's Star Wars The Acolyte, I think it's already very clear that this is not going to get passed down from generation to generation either. However, let's have a genuine good look at what it does to the myth of Star Wars. What does it try to change? What does it try to add? What does it try to take away from what George Lucas did? And does it do it in a way that is quote-unquote good, meaning at the very least that the story makes sense, that the characters make sense, and that they can in some way resonate with the audience. Can it be part of a greater mythos? We're going to have a look at each episode and evaluate if it is indeed a good story, if it can even be a mythical story. And I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can. Sure, there's going to be moments that might make me really angry, or there might be other moments that are going to make me really happy. We are going to find out together as we go through these episodes. So, with that being said, let's begin with the first 2 episodes of Disney's Star Wars: The Acolyte.
2 hours later.
Okay, I know that I had some high-minded ideas for talking about The Acolyte, but holy cow, it was really, really bad. Completely flew in the face of everything that's been established in terms of lore, physics, the Jedi, personalities, force abilities, everything just kind of went out the window with the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte. So really, I do have to judge this in terms of what the story itself gave us, because holy cow, if I have to judge The Acolyte just based on what we already know from the Star Wars canon, and that even includes some of the stuff from the comic books, this was awful. This didn't make any sense. None of the characters' actions made sense at all, especially at the beginning when the Acolyte goes to murder Trinity, and yes, that's the name I'm just going to give her because I can't remember her actual name within the show. She was completely forgettable because the fight was also completely forgettable. Holy cow. Okay. Well, let's just get onto track. Judging The Acolyte on its own merit as its own interesting story, I'll have to say I'm not very invested. And it begins with the opening little statement as it fades on in. It was incredibly boring against a stagnant background without the cool sprawling text or any kind of unique interesting talk, music to pull me on in, and the wording was just bland. It was awful. If it were me, I would say, okay, then if I have to hook people with some dark suggestion of what is about to come, I would probably do something with, it's been almost 1,000 years of prosperity in the Galactic Republic. The Jedi have maintained peace throughout the entire galaxy. But within the darkest recesses and shadows, where the Jedi dare not to think or go, evil has been stirring. Forces are gathering to initiate an upcoming conflict. Something like that. Actually, like, make it seem like, ooh, everything's bright and prosperous, but wait! The villains are coming. This read like a first draft pitch for how you would begin a book. And it wasn't good. This needed to be rewritten. It needed to have someone go through and say, does this actually hook people? And then give it to people who have no idea what's happening with the Acolyte and say, does this make you want to continue on with this? If I told you that this was a 500-page book that you had to read in a week, would you be interested just based on this opening? Or would you buy this book if you turned it to the back cover and that was what you were given? And if you get more no's than yeses, which I'm betting you're probably going to get more no's, then definitely you got to go back and rewrite it. And then the opening battle sequence was just sloppy. Force powers and lightsabers aside, it was bad. When, what's her bucket? May, evil twin, decides to take a hostage. What does she do with said hostage? She tosses the hostage away the moment that Trinity begins to approach her. That's not what you do with a hostage. Also, Trinity, why aren't you using your Force powers? And again, this is just me thinking about, ooh, you've got special kinds of powers with the Force. Not even thinking about all the other abilities that you have within the Star Wars canon. You know, you could use the Force to try to flick away the knife at the hostage's neck. You could use the Force to try to persuade the kidnapper. You could try to use the Force to slam the hostage into the chest of the kidnapper, thereby throwing her either out the window or into a wall, discombobulating her, which will cause her to drop the knife. You don't need to fancily walk up the stairs and draw your lightsaber. It actually did not add to any of the tension, anxiety, the excitement, excitement, none of it. I started laughing because it was dumb. And then when Maya's like, oh, I will now distract her by throwing my hostage off the balcony, haha! And then Trinity can't even multitask with grabbing the person, pulling out her lightsaber, or using the Force in multiple different kinds of ways. I mean, this isn't anything that's meant to be complicated, especially because it's suggested to us later just how much power she had, that she was a great Jedi, and we see Jedi doing all of these amazing things later on. It doesn't make any sense, and this is already where we get to see a pattern that's going to plague the Acolyte for its first 2 episodes. Things only happen because the plot demands them to. When we get to Osha, when we get to the good twin, she should have died multiple times. She survives by plot armor alone. In fact, she is so stupid that the plot has to go out of its way to save her multiple times. And when I look at a girl like this, I'm like, wait, you were trained to be a Jedi? You must have been one of the worst Jedi of all time. You are pathetic. And if this is what the Jedi are capable of, then they kind of deserve to be wiped out. Why hasn't anyone wiped them out yet? And then if we compare that to actual canon Star Wars, boy, you know what? Master Yoda and Master Windu should have taken over way sooner. Like, just give Master Windu the ability to go back in time and live forever, like the legend that he is, so that way you could go and fix these Jedi, because for crying out loud, the Jedi, before you have the great civil war between the Republic and the Confederates, like, for crying out loud, the Jedi, even at that time, were way more prepared for war than what we get with these doddering old monks. In any case, when Mai kills Trinity, it was so lackluster. The music was like, oh, you should care about this, but I didn't. One of the reasons why I didn't care was because Mai was stupid, Trinity was stupid. I had no idea who these characters were. There was no reason to really be invested in this particular fight. Now then, here's something to consider, because I love analyzing fights. I love talking about fictional battles and the likes. And yes, I myself have once written a couple of characters to be introduced in a big battle. And that can be a whole lot of fun. But one of the things that makes it fun is not just the action. The action must make sense. And the action absolutely did not make sense in this fight. But we need to understand who these characters are through their action, through the dialogue. You still have no idea who Mai or Trinity are through the sparse dialogue or anything else. The one thing that I can say was good about this opening scene is that you are given hints that there's some goodness deep within Mai. And I actually like that. The fact that she is willing to work with the downtrodden, that she's willing to spare the children, that she won't immediately go out and kill anyone who gets in her way. That does show us that there's potentially some goodness to her, but unless you are able to properly build on that, and this unfortunately does come down to the actress's skill, she's not very good at emoting, using her face or her body language to convey even more. These just seem like random acts that, if you're not paying any attention, fly over your head or seem incongruous with everything else that we are watching there on the screen. There needs to be a little bit more effort to take out this little nugget and show us there's something more to the Acolyte than you thought. But coming back to the fight, we needed to have more dialogue, or you need to have just a little bit more setup before Mai shows up in the cantina and then begins to wreck everything. If you don't have that setup, if you don't have just a little bit of characterization, then why should I care about these characters? If you are going to forego all kinds of characterization and focus primarily on the combat, that combat needs to be of a really high quality, which it wasn't. Or you can do the really epic thing and combine personality with combat skill. And I know there's going to be some people who are going to argue that you did get to see that here, but ultimately that's actually more of our projection and our reflection filling in the holes rather than the fight in the moment telling us anything. When in fact, when I showed this to other people, they're like, I have no idea what's going on in this scene, and I actually don't really care. Then when we jump from the lackluster fight on over to Osha, where we try to get some PTSD, she's a merchant who works in these most dangerous jobs that no one is supposed to have. She's a rebel. And then when she smiles while looking into the fire, and then we then cut to her then freaking out later on, it's like, did no one ever bother looking at how someone can actually slip into a PTSD trance. You could have had a cool moment here, but no, you had to bludgeon us over the head, and it seems weak and wimpy. There's really nothing that I get from this other than she has PTSD, which this won't show up again until later on, and also just kind of comes out of nowhere. Then when the Jedi show up, they're just saying, oh, you are the one who's responsible for killing one of our fellow Jedi. Obviously, we have no means of forensics or of actually taking down people's information. We never bothered checking for any sort of fingerprints, and never mind the fact that we have Force abilities that allow us to read people's minds. Nope, you are the one who's it. Again, the plot coming on in and conveniently putting people where they need to be, there is no sense or logic to anything that has just happened. And then Osha continues to be an absolute moron when you have the inmates on this prison ship who break out somehow. That makes absolutely no sense, but the plot needs for there to be a breakout. And then she goes and she helps the person with the weird parasite thing over his mouth, which is subduing him, after she's told that this guy is dangerous and it's very possible that he might attempt to kill her. Oh no, nothing bad will happen to me. Bad stuff begins to happen. She is now marooned on this ship as the ship is about to crash into a planet. What does she do? Assumes the fetal position, crashes into the planet. You know what? Yeah, sure, this is science fiction, this is science fantasy, this is the most ridiculous space opera of all time. So yeah, sure, a person can survive crashing through the atmosphere into a mountain, then onto a plane, as this ship somehow manages to stay intact, and she has no bumps, scrapes, bruises, or anything like that at all. And then when we hop on over to the Jedi, well, the Jedi are trying to say a lot of things that sound profound, and even later on when you meet the apprentice of the great Sith Lord and he's speaking to his acolyte, when you actually stop and say, okay then, so what's going on here? Like, you're not supposed to attack with weapons? Are you trying to be super cool? No, you don't kill with weapons, you kill dreams. That, when even in context, it doesn't make any sense why it's being said. Remove that statement out of context, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's something that was typed up to sound cool, but really has no business being there. And so too do the teachings of the Jedi. The Jedi seem to completely contradict themselves again and again and again. Why should we then care about these people? Why are they the law enforcement or the moral authority of the galaxy when they're so wishy-washy? Well, that'd be interesting for us to then dive into them maybe being the villains, which obviously the Acolyte's supposed to show the Jedi as the villains. But more than anything, the Jedi just seem incompetent, which then makes you wonder, how the heck did the Sith not get completely wiped out? Oh yeah, because of the rule of two. The rule of two was already stupid to begin with, but now the rule of two looks even more ridiculous. If anything, like, the canon looks stupid in light of the Acolyte, and the canon makes the Acolyte look even dumber. So that's why, again, I just have to take it as it is, and it still is stupid and contradictory and makes no sense. If the Jedi have all these powers, again, why wasn't Mai just completely wrecked earlier on? Why? Because the plot demands it so. And then Osha gets saved by Sol, which is another moment of the plot stepping in and saving a girl who is just too dumb to survive. Sol is an absolute moron. I don't care what people have said about that the actor's acting is really good. Yes, he's got a presence on screen. He was given absolutely horrible direction and lines. It all sounds stupid, frivolous, contradictory. Why is this guy hopping around from, no, her twin should be dead. No, her twin is now alive. Oh, don't worry, they won't do anything bad. They will do something bad. They won't run. They will run. What is it? Do you know these girls or not? And if you don't, that's totally okay. We can roll with this. The Jedi continuously prove themselves to be absolute morons throughout this, especially when we get to the big fight of the second episode where Mai is cornered, and people, I've heard other people talk about like how like, oh, this is such a stupid battle, and they talk about how like the fight choreography was a little bit lame, or how she was able to use the dust storm to escape and no one has any sort of scanners on her or anything. Really, the thing that's stupid about this is that they have a whole bunch of Jedi to stop one assassin. You have an entire Temple of Jedi right next door. Send a couple of Jedi to the back door of the apothecary, seal off the exit to the apothecary, then have Sol confront Mai in the apothecary where she has a little room to move around, and then have the other Jedi ring around the apothecary. So if Sol can't convince her to come on out and he happens to lose in that battle, you have a whole bunch of other Jedi who can just close the trap and catch her. And I'm not even that much of a military-minded man. I am not someone who was trained in the art of war and strategy. I am a self-taught novice author, and even I can figure this out. Now, another thing that I actually did like, which I know a lot of people are like, what? This sounds so stupid. I actually liked this bit in the second episode where Mai's like, I can't get to the Jedi Master who's just been floating there for 10 years. All he does is meditate and float. He doesn't do anything. This man does not eat. He does not sleep. He does not talk. He just meditates and floats for 10 years. Congratulations, this guy's achieved immortality. He shouldn't be killable at all. His force field is so powerful that no one can get through. Why isn't this guy the head of the Jedi, for crying out loud? Well, you get that interesting little bit, and I actually did like this, that everyone has a weakness, everyone has regrets, and if you happen to find the one that fits that one person, you can find the chink in their ultimate armor, and you can plunge a dagger right on through. And I like the idea of a Jedi who's been meditating for all these years to try to come to terms with his regrets for something awful that he had done beforehand. I actually think that that's a cool idea. However, because we don't get any build-up for that, we don't get any explanation for that, because it's a mystery box. It's going to be something that we'll reveal maybe by episode 4 or 5, maybe episode 3, I don't know. All I've heard is that episode 3 is supposed to be the last Jedi. We'll see how that goes. But because we get no explanation to it, it just seems like this really awesome guy is just like, oh, forgive me, let me drink a poison. Bleh. Without any understanding of what happened in the past, why the Jedi were there, why the Jedi should feel guilty for this, then it just seems like, again, the plot is just conveniently serving this guy up on a silver platter. And here's another thing. The Acolyte is supposed to be murdering her targets using just purely the Force and her own hatred. She's not supposed to use metal or weapons or poison, and yet that's what she constantly is going to do. What this then communicates to me as a member of the audience is that I shouldn't actually be taking the Acolyte really seriously, because she's not taking her charge seriously. Her hatred and her skill are not enough to pull off what's supposed to be the impossible. I would be way more convinced of just how lethal and capable she was if just by using the Force and her own tenacity and brilliance, she was able to undermine the Jedi and take them apart from within. But we don't see any of that. Instead, she constantly has to revert to tricks, to other people helping her. As a result, I actually don't see her as a threat. By the end of episode 2, she is a joke as much as her good sister is, and again, the plot is what's helping these characters get things done. It is frustrating! If you as a writer want to show that the plot is not in complete control of your characters, there's a couple of things that you can do. Number one is this. You can actually let some of those characters who seem to have plot armor suffer significant loss. That would be neat to see, especially for the heroes, where people are like, oh, the heroes are just able to steamroll their way through everything. Deliver a significant blow to the heroes and have them then go through the process of coming to terms with that loss, grieving if they need to, trying to become more powerful or more intelligent, or become better prepared in order to face what defeated them in the past and rise above that challenge that once defeated them. That is one way you can do it. Another thing is this: just have your characters make plenty of mistakes. If they're humans, well, we're all human, we all make mistakes. Allow for them to make some mistakes. And the thing is this, is that Osha's making plenty of mistakes. I could actually believe her to be a regular human being. It's just that she's so dumb and so clumsy that how she has managed to survive doesn't make any sense. Make her at least somewhat capable of making it through the day without blowing something up or tripping over her own feet, or at least doing something that seems competent. She says things that are supposed to make her sound competent, yet everything that we see her do is either something that is empowered by the Jedi to make it happen, or her droid helps her out, or the plot literally steps in to save her. And you can tell that. So as a result, Osha just doesn't seem like a believable or endearing hero. Doesn't seem like someone who's even capable of doing what needs to be done. And Mai just looks like a terrible excuse for a follower of the dark side who can't even do something simple that her master has told her to do. One of the things that's frustrating in all of this is that the more that I look at these 2 episodes, the more that I see that there's potential there. There's actually a story that if you were willing to go through and really work on it, not the reshoots that are purported to have happened, not the reshoots, instead going back to the script, going back to the story and saying, okay, just who are our characters? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Who are they going up against? What are their strengths and their weaknesses? How can we tease this out just a little bit more? Furthermore, scrap the dialogue, scrap it with the pretentiousness, take some time, make it good and messy. What I would even do, because they've already hired a lot of these actors and actresses, before they've even finalized the dialogue, I would have them get into a room and say, okay then, you guys are going to ad-lib. We give you the prompt, we want to see what you do in character, we're going to get a feel for it, we have some ideas, we're going to play out, and then we're going to give you some prompts, we're going to see what happens, and then based off that say, okay then, so this is what we felt worked really well with your characters and your dialogue, this is what didn't, we're going to scrap what didn't work, and now we're going to go back to the building blocks and then try to make this dialogue sound believable within your characters. And that is something that really any author should do. Writing dialogue is difficult, especially because at many times it becomes a monologue between ourselves, where the author is just pontificating, using different characters to string the audience along from point A to point B. And that's not the way that a good conversation should be. Instead, within a good conversation, you should be able to see the character of each person who is speaking, the words they use. How do they speak? How do they express themselves? Do they use long sentences or short clip sentences? Are they frustrated? Are they happy? Are they laid back, angry, sad, etc.? You want to be able to convey emotion, though not just simply emotion, but the emotion through the lens of that character. You can have someone who's really angry but is able to control that anger and speak just a little bit more calmly and deliberately, pointedly, and get that across. Whereas someone might be like, oh, don't worry about it. I've already trained this girl before. She's not responsible. Trust me. Just let me go. I will talk to her. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to solve who really committed the murder of my good Jedi friend. Like, yeah, I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous right there, but honestly, that's what you've got to do as the writer. Actually have the dialogue spoken within character and not just be like, oh, it sounds really great in my head, and then listen to people saying like, oh, they said my words, it's perfect. I say perfect. When you have that particular frame of mind, you are always going to be stuck in the first draft, and the first draft always sucks. So ultimately, I could rant and rave and rage, really, like some people have, for hours about these 2 episodes of The Acolyte. But let me just say this. This is really pathetic Star Wars. It goes against canon, and when you remove the canon from the story and just say, look, we're just going to judge this as is, you begin to realize that everything's happening because the plot has demanded it to be so. A lot of the characters ultimately fall flat. Some of the actors and actresses do a good enough job of at least bringing some life to these overall flat characters, but the dialogue is just messy and silly and contradictory. The Jedi ultimately don't make much sense. The motivations and the actions of a lot of characters don't yet make a whole lot of sense. And yes, I understand this is only the 2nd episode. It doesn't need to have that much revealed. I can buy that Mai is really angry about whatever happened in their past when she apparently killed the family, though probably most likely the Jedi were the ones who killed her family, and now she's just out for simple revenge, and it's poor Osha who doesn't understand what actually happened. That's very likely the route that we're going to go, and I can understand and see how that's being set up. But for many of the very poignant, the scenes that are meant to be poignant, the scenes that are meant to be emotional gut punches, the scenes that are to make us believe that Mai is incredible in how she's able to kill these Jedi, they fall flat because we still don't fully understand Mai. We don't understand her victims. We don't understand their history. As a result, these battles, these moments, don't really impress. And the acting and the directing and the cinematography don't really help either. Why is everything so dang dark right here? You do realize that there is way more light to most planets than you are right now giving them credit for, especially if there's life on those planets. There's definitely plenty of light. So please allow us to see what is happening on the screen. Please. Oh my gosh, I know that I began this video by trying to be a little bit more high-minded, a little bit more optimistic and interested, in at least saying, what can we see here about transforming myth? And ultimately, we were just given a horrible story. I was right when I said that most likely these stories are not going to be passed down from generation to generation. I fully expect that the Acolyte will be forgotten by most viewers and by most Star Wars fans within a decade. It will not be passed down. As such, it will not be a part of the core Star Wars myth. Now, there is a discussion to be had about what a story like this does to the overall mythos of Star Wars in the long run. And that's going to be a conversation that I hope to have pretty soon. So, you want to make sure that you've subscribed to Camille's Harem, that you've hit the bell icon to receive notifications, so that way you can be informed for when we do happen to have that conversation. Because I think that is a very important one to have, considering, well, that Hollywood has not just simply been mining and milking all of its major myths for all that they're worth, but that there is a definite movement within the entertainment industry to try to rewrite and reimagine all of these older successful stories in a whole new light. And while that's not inherently bad in and of itself, that's happened to myths for millennia, when it's so concentrated and so bad, makes you wonder, what's going to happen going forward? When all of the new installments are bad, are people going to want to pass along the myths? And if they don't, then what's going to take its place? Those are some very interesting things to consider. So guys, thank you so much for joining us for this crazy, annoying part of the adventure that we call writing. Hopefully I was able to give you at least some insights into how you can improve your own writing as an author by looking at so many mistakes that were made in these 2 episodes. And again, I'm just kind of scratching the surface because I do not want to be ranting for the next 3 hours, because it would take at least 3 hours to cover everything that is wrong and probably still not hit it all for these 2 episodes. That's just how bad it is. But if you're looking for something that isn't bad, something that I can guarantee is going to be fun, something you are going to enjoy, then please check out my own space adventures that I've written, The Monarch Mercenaries. You can find a link for it in the description below. It would help us out a whole lot. But otherwise, thank you again so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.